right, welcome to today's podcast. Hey there, Sarah. How are you doing today? My name is Joe McCullough, and today's topic is Make Your Message Memorable. Brain facts that all speakers should know. Hey, good to see you. Hey, MGD Morgan, welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe McCullough. I'm a speaker, best-selling author, and the physics program chair here at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, California. And my obsession is the brain, how people learn, how we can use that information to better display our message. For me, how I can use that information to make sure my teachers learn. Let me turn that around. Hello, welcome. Let me move that. Okay, so today the topic is how to make your message memorable. Brain facts that all speakers should know. And let me say, this is not a scope about public speaking. This is a scope about the brain, what we know about the brain, and how you can use that information as a speaker to make sure that your information is remembered. Make sure it's stored in long-term memory. Yesterday I went through a brain fact, and what I'd like to do is quickly recap that for you. And let me get my recap. Since the semester's starting, I decided I had to get my recap out. Let me just quickly tell you how I use this. Every single day at the beginning of class, I have an entire whiteboard filled with all of the information that we studied the previous day. And what I do is after I bring the class in, and I'll talk how I do that, we start with a recap. And I spend about 5 to 10 minutes recapping the most important information that we went through yesterday. And the reason that's important is because one of the keys to long-term memory is spaced repetition, meaning reviewing the information at well-spaced intervals. And what that does is it fires electricity back over the neural pathways that were established the day before, and it makes the learning that much stronger. So what we went through yesterday is there's 3 main modalities for learning, and those are visual, things that we take in through our eyes, auditory, everything that we hear, and then kinesthetic, what we do with our body. And the important brain fact that you need to know is that visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information is stored in different parts of the brain. This is actually catching light. Let me take this off. Real quick. Visual information is stored in our visual cortex. If you touch the back of your head, your hand is less than ½ an inch above the part of your brain that's allowing you to see this scope right now. Auditory information, everything that we hear, is stored in our auditory cortex. If you place your hands right above your ears, you have one on each side. This is the part of the brain that's allowing you to listen to this scope. And then kinesthetic information, everything we do with our body, our sense of touch, motion, things like that, are stored in our somatosensory cortex. Now, the reason this is important is we used to think that the brain stored information almost like a videotape, where it was just constantly being recorded the same way you would record a TV show, but that's far from the truth. What happens is we have information from our senses enters the brain, and then it actually gets split up and sent to different parts of the brain. All of the auditory information gets sent to our auditory cortex, all of the visual information to our visual cortex, and all the kinesthetic information to our somatosensory cortex. Hey, Divine Lisa Long, how are you doing? What this means is that if you want your information to stick, you need to use different teaching modalities. Because let's say you only teach one way, then the information will only be stored in one part of the brain. And then when you go to try and retrieve the information, or your students try and retrieve it at a later date, it's only stored in one spot. But if you teach using visual components, that information is going to be stored in their visual cortex. If you teach using auditory components, auditory teaching modalities, it's going to be stored in their auditory cortex. And if you get them moving, if you involve gestures, if you use some kind of kinesthetic component, it's going to be stored in your somatosensory cortex. Doing great job. Thanks so much, Lisa. What I'd like to do today is share with you 8 specific teaching modalities that are for visual, 8 specific that are auditory, and 8 specific ones that are kinesthetic. Use a combination of these, and it's going to help guarantee that the information gets transferred from your short-term to long-term memory. Not quite sure how this is going to look on camera. I'm still experimenting with different ways of doing these scopes, let me go through these and we'll see how it goes. So the very first visual teaching strategy is use flip charts for key content and then hang those flip charts around the room. I love using flip charts during my fun shops, and the great thing about doing this is once you're done with a piece of content with a flip chart, you can hang it on the room. And by the end of, let's say, a one-day training, you might have 15 flip charts hung around the room. And then a really great way of reviewing the information is doing what's called a gallery walk, where you get participants in groups of 2 or 3 or 4 people, and you have them walk around the room, spend about 20 to 30 seconds at each flip chart, and then review what they learned. Second visual strategy is use color. Color code your content. Unfortunately, I printed this out on a black and white printer, but I did spend some time making sure that this was colorful. Our visual cortex, the part of our brain that processes visual information, uses about half of our brain's resources. So if we want our information to stick, the more visual components we can add, the better. Use color, never just use one color. If you're doing flip charts, use at least 2 or 3 colors. Hey, Mary Washers. For those people that are joining, my name is Joe McCullough, and what we're talking about today is how to make your message stick. Things that we know about the brain, how the brain processes and stores information, and how you can use that as a speaker to make sure your message is remembered. We talked about the fact that visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information is stored in different parts of the brain. So to make your message memorable, you need to use different teaching modalities. Right now we're talking about visual strategies. First one I talked about, use flip charts and then hang the flip charts around the room. And then when you're referring back to information, you can just refer to the flip chart, and it's great to stand next to it. Another great thing is, as a review, have everybody do what's called a gallery walk. Walk around the room, stand under a specific flip chart, and then review with partners what that information is. Also talked about using color to color code your content. Third visual strategy is use pictures and diagrams in slides. A big mistake that presenters make is using way too much text in their PowerPoint slides. You want to use words sparingly. You want your you want your PowerPoint slides to be full of powerful images and pictures. Another one is teach specific content in a specific location. So for me, whenever I'm reviewing material, I'm always standing in one part of the classroom. Oftentimes, if I'm looking for questions, I might move to a different part of the classroom. But if you teach specific content in specific welcome to live Periscope. If you teach specific content in specific parts of the room, what you're doing is anchoring your content to that location, so that every time you then move over to that location, it'll remind participants about the content. Another visual teaching strategy is, let's see how well this works. Teach specific content in a specific location. We just did. Stand still while presenting chunks of information. Move around between chunks. Visual learners can get distracted by too much movement, and this is something that I do in my classroom all the time. I'm constantly moving, and this is what I'm working on. So try and stand still while presenting information and then move around between different chunks. Another great thing, anchor a prop to a specific content. Anchor a prop to specific content. Some of the props I use, I showed before. Anytime I'm reviewing information in my class, which I do at the beginning of every single class, I start with a recap. Students know that anytime I put this hat on, it means we're reviewing important information, and it means it's a very safe time for them to ask questions. That's always safe time to ask questions in my class, but when I put this on, I'm really expecting questions. I love the recap. Thank you, Sarah. Let me show you, this is my original recap, but it was way too distracting. It was my brain recap, but students were getting too distracted by it. Another thing, I love that easy button.
That was easy.
I put one of these in my classroom, and then every time somebody asks a good question or we get through a problem,
that was easy.
And what this does is actually it starts to anchor positivity to learning. Anytime a student asks a good question or we get through doing a hard problem,
that was easy.
I hit the "that was easy" button, and it lets students know that, hey, we're finished with that, we're moving on. Another fun one a student gave me, and I don't use this too much because I don't like the word no, but it's a little pen.
No! 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 I said no! No!
And another great thing you can do, they actually have these buttons that you can record any message you want.
Physics rules!
I don't know if you can hear that.
Physics rules!
So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll make a little message and I'll put this right next to the box where they hand their homework in, and they hit this and they get a little message from me. Okay, another one is show videos. You want to show videos. Videos have a way of just drawing people in. You probably know just how effective videos can be. So anytime you're doing a presentation, if you can incorporate videos, awesome. And then last but not least, this paper's not really working out well. Use visual language such as imagine, picture, can you see it? It looks like. So what we just talked about are 8 teaching strategies that incorporate a visual component. Let me kind of go through these one more time. I know this paper's not working out well, but we'll see how it goes. 1, use flip charts for key content and then hang those flip charts around the room. 2, use color code your content. 3, use pictures and diagrams in your slides. Use text sparingly when you're making PowerPoint slides. 4, teach specific content in a specific location. 5, stand still when presenting information. Move around between chunks. 6, anchor specific content to a prop. 7, show videos. And then 8, use visual language. Those are 8 great techniques to incorporate a visual component, and that's going to be stored in our visual cortex. Before I move on to 8 awesome auditory strategies, are there any questions I can answer about visual teaching strategies? And pause. No questions, then we are going to move on. So these are 8 teaching strategies that you can use that incorporate an auditory component. First one is huge. Use music. I love using music in my classroom. As students come in, I have upbeat contemporary rock and roll. Anytime I have students interacting, doing some kind of pair share or peer instruction, I have upbeat non-instrumental music. I even have a homework collection song, and I teach college physics. The homework collection song, as soon as I put the song on, they have until the song ends. After that, it's considered late. So think about using music anytime you're giving a training. I love using music at the beginning as students are coming in, but also anytime people are standing up and sharing and doing not group shares, but individual shares with partners. Think about playing upbeat non-instrumental music. 2, use callbacks. Have students repeat concepts, key concepts, and directions back. I can't really read this backwards. I need my reading glasses. A callback is something where you say something and then the students repeat it. I might say something like, okay, so today we're talking about Newton's laws. What are we talking about? And then everybody will say Newton's laws. Or I might say something like, is that good or good? And then people say, good. So what you're doing is you're just getting them to repeat key content. When that happens, they're actually speaking it out of their own mouth, hearing it with their own ears, and that's going to make the information that much more memorable. 3, provide opportunities for students to review with a neighbor or within a group. As much as possible, if you're doing, let's say, a day-long training, every 25, 30 minutes, you want to have students interacting with each other, sharing what they learned, sharing a key takeaway, get them talking. 4, use vocal variations. This is something I'm working on a lot. You want to use high voice and low voice. Sometimes whispering can be really, really effective. But think about varying your vocal variations, doing things unexpected, slowing down and whispering, talking higher or fast, but think about varying it. Another great one, and this one is super important, and it is use purposeful pauses. I love to use purposeful pauses because people are like hanging on your word. I might say something like, and the most important thing, if you remember one thing from this day, it is, and you wait 3 or 4 or 5 seconds and people are just hanging on your words. They want to know what that important thing is. Another one, hey, Asumi, anchor content to sounds or voices. Anytime you use a specific kind of voice, it might mean one thing. Quick little recap for those of you who are just joining. My name is Joe McCullough, and today we're talking about how to make your message memorable. We're not talking about speaking skills per se, but what we know about the brain and how you can use that information as a speaker, as a trainer, as a teacher to make sure that students remember the information long term. We went through some visual strategies. If you're just tuning in, you can check out the replay. Right now we're talking about some auditory strategies. And the reason we're doing that is because visual information is stored in one part of the brain, auditory information is stored in another part, and then kinesthetic information is stored in a different part. If we use multiple modalities, information will be stored in different parts of the brain, and it'll be that much easier to remember and recall at a later point. Let's continue on with auditory strategies. Great one is have students create a song, chant, or rhyme to remember key information. I love to use music, and sometimes I make up my own little physics rhymes or chants. Thoughts on infographics? Yes, infographics are awesome. It's almost like a mind map, and it's one of the things I teach students. What it is, it's a very visual presentation of information and how things are related. So infographics are great. However, if you're going to use them on a PowerPoint, make sure that they're not too cluttered, because I've seen infographics that contain a wealth of information, but they're really meant to be studied offline, and it's hard to take in an entire screen full of information during a training. So infographics are great, but think about keeping them simple if you're doing it at a live event. If it's something that you're handing out, then the infographic can be more detailed. And then the last auditory strategy is allow time to process auditory information. If you're giving a key content, something that just has to be remembered, this is a huge point, give the point and then give time for students to process it. And this is a mistake I see teachers make a lot when I evaluate them, is they talk and they talk and they talk, but they never give time to just process the information. Students need time to process. Oh, thank you for the hearts. Let's do a quick little recap of the auditory strategies I went through. How do you incorporate all of these? Do you plan it beforehand? Great question, Sarah. The answer is I did initially. I used to think about, okay, what is my visual component? What is my auditory component? What is my kinesthetic component? And I did that for a couple years, but what you'll find is that this stuff starts to become second nature. Even little things like,
That was easy.
that was easy button is something I incorporated maybe 5 years ago. It was a huge hit. I keep doing it. The recap is something that I didn't invent, but I saw at Quantum Learning when I used to train teachers at Quantum Learning for Teachers, and I used it in my classroom. They love it. So the answer is yes, initially you're going to have to plan it, but the more you do it, the more you'll start to realize, oh, I've been talking for a while. I need to make sure they get up and move. Or I'm using way too much auditory information. Let me show a powerful video or a powerful image. Okay, auditory teaching strategies we talked about. 1, use music. Music is a phenomenal way of changing people's state. You want people to be more energized, put on upbeat music. You want people to journal and think about stuff, put on classical music, match the music to what they're doing. 2, use callbacks. Use what? Callbacks, that's right. Have students repeat key information. 3, provide opportunities for students to review within a group or within partners like that. If you're doing a training, I think about every 20, 25 minutes, making sure students are actively involved talking with each other. 3, use vocal variations. Think about lowering your voice, talking quietly, maybe even whispering if it's a really important point. Or using loud voices or something that just breaks it up. 3, a great one, this is not 3, this is actually number 4 or 5. This is a big one. It's use purposeful pauses. Right before you're about to deliver what I like to call a knowledge bomb, pause, make sure everybody just can't wait to hear what you have to say, and then deliver your knowledge bomb. Anchor content to sounds or voices. So anytime you're presenting a specific type of content, you might use a certain type of voice. Have students create a song or chant to remember key information. You might notice that I'm doing visual, auditory, and kinesthetic a lot. That's because I've taught it so many times using these gestures that it's so well linked in my brain. It's hard for me to say visual, auditory, and kinesthetic without doing the motion. And then the very last one is allow time to process auditory information. Let me pause right there. That was 8 auditory teaching strategies. What questions can I answer? No questions. We're going to move on to kinesthetic teaching strategies. One more time, let me do a little recap for those new to the broadcast. My name is Joe, and I'm here today talking about how to make your message memorable. What we know is that the brain stores visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information into different parts of the brain. So if you want your information to stick and you want it to be in your students' long-term memory, you need to make sure to use visual, auditory, and kinesthetic teaching strategies. I went through 8 visual teaching strategies. I just did 8 auditory strategies, and now we're going to finish with 8 kinesthetic teaching strategies. Kinesthetic strategy number 1 is provide opportunities to learn by doing. Now, we have lots of different people out there. I don't know exactly what you're presenting, but as much as possible, try and arrange a training so that students can actually learn by doing. The best way to learn anything is to get out there and do it yourself. So rather than talking on and on and on about a particular thing, if you can get students involved and have them learn by doing, it's going to be awesome. 2, and I struggle with this a little bit, is talk slowly. Once we get excited, we start to talk faster and faster. I'm trying to limit these scopes to like 10 or 15 minutes, and I have a ton of content that I want to give, so I know I'm probably talking quickly. But for kinesthetic learners, talking slowly can be a great way of really communicating the information. 3, create activities that involve role-playing. Now, again, this depends upon what kind of content you're delivering. Obviously, I don't really do this in my college physics class, but if you can do some kind of role-playing where you have students taking on different roles and interacting with each other, great, great strategy. 4, provide opportunities for movement. Allow students to get up and move. Try and design activities where students are physically moving. 5, is that 5 again? I lost track. Create motions or gestures for key content. Kind of like visual, auditory, kinesthetic. When I'm talking about the brain, I talk about neurons that fire together, wire together. You use motions to actually anchor specific types of information. Also, do standing reviews and pair shares. I mentioned this before. Ideally, every 15, 20, 25 minutes, you're getting students actively involved. Have them stand up, find a partner, and review what you've been talking about. Also, great thing I do a lot is ask students to sit up or adjust their physiology. Something I learned at a seminar that I think has always stuck with me is great teaching is great state management. Knowing how to manage your students' physical, mental, and emotional states. If you see that people are starting to just sort of nod off, I'll ask my students, okay, everybody please take Sit up straight, take a deep breath, blow it out. Just a quick adjustment of their physiology can help make sure students are paying attention for another 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. And then last but not least, lead students in a quick stretch. This can either be standing or sitting. I can tell you the very first time I had my physics class get up and stretch, they thought I was crazy, but after doing that a few times throughout the semester, or actually a few times throughout the first week, they start to see the benefit of actually getting up, standing, moving their body so they're not sitting for 90 minutes. Well, that's it. We've been talking today about make your message memorable, brain facts that every speaker should know. And I really just went through one today. I did it yesterday talking about the fact that we store information in different parts of the brain. But what I went through today is some specific strategies for visual, auditory, and kinesthetic teaching. Think about any time you're presenting information, presenting it multiple ways. Great info, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Tomorrow is Wednesday, the next day is Thursday, and the day after that is Friday. I am going to be doing this series for the next 3 days. It's going to be a 5-day series. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I'm going to give you a couple other key pieces of brain information, what we know from neuroscience about the brain and how people learn information, and then tell you how you can apply that to become a better speaker. Well, not a better speaker necessarily, but to make sure your information gets stored long term. Because no matter what you're speaking about, if your students can't remember it a week later, then really it's not that effective now, is it? Before I sign off, what questions can I answer about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic teaching strategies? Awesome, teaching a broadcast, thank you. I missed the explanation of the bowling ball. Is there somewhere I can go to watch the video? Yes, so I have a YouTube channel that I archive all of these scopes, and I don't do it the exact day, but a couple days later, I archived everything up to yesterday. So if you go to YouTube, search for Joe McCullough, McCullough, you can find all the archives. And if you want to be informed of future scopes, please swipe to the right on an iPhone, swipe straight up on an Android, or tap that little person in the corner and tap follow me. I'm getting on scope every single day for an entire year. I believe this is day 20, and I'm giving daily doses of dopamine through education, inspiration, and motivation. Thanks, my kids loved it. My son was actually sad it didn't hit your face. What I think I'm going to do this year is make a big production of it. I'm going to walk into the class with all sorts of bandages on my nose and Band-Aids to make it seem like I got smacked in the face. Anyway, I'm also going to be showing some cool physics demos in the next couple weeks. Semester starting for me on Monday, so once I start teaching and setting up demos for my students, a lot of times I'll just do a quick periscope and show you some amazing physics. Okay, that's it. My name is Dr. Joe McCullough. Thank you so much for spending some time spending some time with me, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.